Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Let's get this receipt attached to the damn. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. Actually, it's good afternoon. Wanted to share this article with you guys because this article that I found, it's really good as far as the information that is being provided in it, sounding very professional, coming from a professional who is pretty well known when you go and you look at his biography. I don't want to say the name. I left a link down in the description for you guys. And I don't want to get like copyright infringements or something like that. So I'm not going to read this whole article, but there is a couple of things that I want to point out that seems to be very typical of the mainstream media kind of point of view, the narrative that you hear, that is very, very inaccurate. And now in this article, like I said, I left a link down in the description for you guys. It has this to say right towards the very beginning. It says, in 2020, the Fed indicated it would tolerate periods above 2% to compensate for periods below that level. But recent experience indicates that the Fed is challenged to manage inflation down to 2% after letting it exceed that limited. Now, I thought to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, dude, you just said it. You just said that the Federal Reserve is not going for a 2% target. They're going for above 2%. And then immediately discredited that, saying, nah, they can't get down to 2% target. And I'm like, bro, they're not going for a 2% target. They're not trying to get to 2%. Whether you think they can or can't get there doesn't matter, because that's not where they're going. And that's what I find very critical for the information that then comes after this, because everything that is now coming from this gentleman's point of view is one of the Fed trying to get to a 2% target, which they are not trying to do. So I think to myself, what is it that people are going to think when they read this article, internalize the information, believe that this gentleman, who is, very well known within the community, not within, like, say, the online community like we are, but within the mainstream media community, what are people going to think? I mean, they're going to think that this guy's very accurate in what he thinks, what he believes, what he is saying, how the Federal Reserve doesn't know what they're doing, how they're screwing it up. And then later on in the article, he has this to say. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Talking about how the Fed, let's see here. Financial markets watch closely the members' testimony. Okay. Later on, he says, okay, catering, here we go. Catering to equity investors as opposed to pursuing the Fed's stated goal of getting inflation to 2% is not what the Fed should be doing, because that's not what they are doing. See, let me read it again. This is very, very, very common to hear within the mainstream media, within the narrative, right? Is this exact statement: catering to equity investors as opposed to pursuing the Fed's stated goal of catering inflation to 2% is not what the Fed should be doing. They're not doing that. They're not getting to a 2% goal. Their 2% goal is a long run average inflation rate. It's an expectation. They're going for moderately above 2% for some time. And what I find interesting about this is that if you go and you look at the report, here, hold on. Where is it? This was the report to Congress given February 7th of 2025. In that report, they straight up say it, that the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Right? They're not going for this 2% target like this gentleman thinks. And then if you go and you continue on with the article, he has something else very interesting to say. Oops, where is it? It goes, the problem is there is no one Fed voice other than the statement issued at the conclusion of the meetings, and the FOMC members disagree a lot. I don't necessarily agree with that. They don't disagree a lot. The mainstream media view, when they out there, throwing their jawboning, forward guidance, credible threats out there on the mainstream media, that seems very confusing. Yeah, okay, I would agree with that if that's what you're following and watching. But that's the propagandized information that is part of their monetary policy of using their words to try and guide the markets. If you go and you read their speeches, you don't think that at all. Okay? I mean, I don't know if this gentleman is just not reading the speeches or if he's part of the propagandized machine to spread the misinformation. See, that's what I really think has taken place. See, right here, he goes on to say, the December forecast of 2025 inflation range from 2.1 to 3.1 and right moderately above 2% for where the Fed funds rate should settle once 2% inflation is accomplished should be 2.4 to 3.9. Okay, they're not going for a 2% inflation. So I don't know why it would settle there. That doesn't, like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, okay, once they get to 2%, it's just like, who in the world believes that they're going for 2%? Oh, yeah, that's right. 99% of the misinformed people are. Okay. Goes on to say this, the Fed credibility is damaged by raising its expectations for inflation, yet moving policy in contrary direction to avoid rattling stock prices. Again, complete BS. Right? Again, very common thought coming from the mainstream media, from the narrative out there, is to believe that. This is not accurate at all. Most people think that the Federal Reserve is like, okay, this is very common to think, right here. By raising its expectations for inflation, yet moving policy contrary to the direction to avoid rattling the stock prices. This is very misinformed belief. Now, if you go and you read in the makeup strategy coming from the Federal Reserve, they have this statement. They said inflation expectations are more difficult of the guidance. An unexpected loosening could lower inflation expectations if the market interpreted the action as the Federal Reserve predicting a weak economy in the future. If the public instead saw the change as simply reflecting a more accommodative policy stance, inflation expectations would be expected to rise. They can move the inflation expectations up or down by the delivery of the information, even though the action is the same. Right? I don't know if this guy knows this, but the Federal Reserve had communicated that back in 2020, right? The same time when he was dismissing the fact that the Federal Reserve is going for an average inflation rate over time with moderately above 2%. The entire article, which sounds incredibly smart and intelligent, is so inaccurate from the very beginning that everything that is internalized from this dude is going to misguide you, misinform you, mislead you. All right? If you can't see it, like if you didn't internalize the credible threat theory, again, from the very beginning to understand what that is, you would read this article and really believe that this guy knows what he's talking about. It's a very smart sounding article. Right? But yet he discredits the information right at the very beginning, which is the accurate information that he should be following. And I think I know why. It's either one, it's only for two reasons that this would happen. That he would literally say the Federal Reserve has this strategy for going moderately above 2%. He puts the link in there that says this is when they said it, right? And then discredits that information. Now, why would he do that, right? Why would he do that? If it's one, to misinform the people, to steer them off in the wrong direction, to say, hey, look over here, not over here, right? That's one way of doing it, and, being paid to do that. That's like, a very real possibility that could be happening here. Or the other one is that the gentleman is so in tune with the idea of what it is that he believes that comes from the Federal Reserve's monetary policy of a 2% target and trying to adjust interest rates to achieve a 2% target. And this is everything in his entire world that he believes is this 2% target, and nothing outside of that can ever possibly exist except for a 2% target. And since he strategized, invested, informed, taught, and learned everything he knew about a 2% target, that he's not going to see anything else. That's the way most people end up seeing it, is probably like that. Anyway. You guys having fun? 10 minutes into this video, we got 192 people watching. Brody's saying hit the like button on the way in on the stream. please, everybody, because that will make the YouTube share it more and widely, so we get more interesting questions in here. Thank you so much, Brody, for being here. All righty, Sunday afternoon. Yes, deja vu. Thank you for being here. All right, let's see if we can cruise down to average inflation. Yep, earn 25% more than inflation. You'll be fine. I can see it in the price of eggs. Prove it. Well, okay, you can see what in the price of eggs? What, de-dollarization or de-dollar valuing or dollar devaluing? There you go. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, you don't think it's like the lack of eggs that are out there due to the fact that they culled a bunch of them? I mean, you can go to places in this world where eggs are cheap, right? So all of a sudden, the inflation, the dollar devaluing doesn't exist in eggs that are, in some far off Mexico town, right? You know, the understanding of supply and demand and supply chain breakdowns, that is really the better understanding of how prices are found. You can print up all the money in the world, right? But if that money never enters the system, or it doesn't enter the system in all channels, that's how I should say. If it doesn't enter the system in all channels at once, you are not going to see the inflationary scenario like you would expect to see from money printing. Money printing causes all prices to go up, right? Except for in lumber, silver, and oil. It doesn't exist in that, right? I mean, all the money printing in the world doesn't seem to affect those prices. So when we think about what it is that's creating inflation, it comes from the injection of money from all channels at once. And that's something that is very difficult to create inside of an economy in where you have a debt-based currency in which that money is lent into the system. So think about quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, where the Federal Reserve printed up a quadrupling of the money supply, far more than what they had done on a percentage basis than this last round of quantitative easing. So 20 years ago, the Federal Reserve took their balance sheet of $850 billion to $4.5 trillion and failed to produce the inflationary scenario that they were looking for. So I don't I mean, everybody else can just say, hey man, I'm going to go pick a product over here and I'm going to talk about how expensive it is. My wife just bought 6 boxes of cereal for $1.79 a box, right? And big boxes of cereal too. I mean, these are normally what, $5, $6 boxes of cereal? So, I mean, I can go and pick and choose what it is that I see going into a deflationary scenario, or doesn't seem to have inflationary aspects to it at all. But if you just want to pick on eggs and say, hey, prove it and make my point on eggs alone and nothing else out there, then you're going to be very well misinformed. All right? So go stick it out, man. Go stick it out and stick to your point. I mean, I understand it from a much different view. And, if you have plenty of supply out there, then you're not going to have an inflationary scenario that goes along with it. Just look at lumber, look at oil, look at silver. There's loads of supply. Well, not silver. Silver's different because it's manipulated. But oil and lumber are plentiful supply. And there's no, inflationary concerns about that. People are like, oh man, they're going to bring gas prices down by drill, baby, drill. And I'm thinking, how much cheaper can you get oil before the companies just don't do it? Right? Probably not much. I don't eat eggs, so inflation doesn't affect me. There you go, Jay. Right? Let's see here. When eggs hit 49 cents a dozen in 6 months, the dollar must be strong. Yeah, you guys can... Okay, do we have any other questions going on here? Okay, you are correct. For some time, not overtime, is misspoke. That could be millions to some folks, but I still don't understand housing. A 2% goal, 2% overtime term average. What's the difference? Well, okay, so the difference about 2% over time is that when you run persistently under 2% from the grapevine, okay, so here's the problem that they knew. And this is why studying and understanding the credible threat theory is by far the best one out there, is because it takes you back 20 years. Okay? It has to go back 20 years in order for you to understand it, because it really goes back to the Ben Bernanke speech given in 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, 2002, not 2020, 2002. Making sure, it's talking about deflation, making sure it doesn't happen here. And now, to understand how it is that the Federal Reserve was going to run into a point in which that the Fed funds rate was going to hit 0, right? Meaning that dropping the Fed funds rate was no longer going to be an effective tool. And so this is very important to understand. It's like knowing that you're going to run out of fuel for your car, right? And knowing this, like you can see the gas needle, it's getting closer, it's on a quarter, it's a half a tank, it's a quarter tank, and now it's getting really close and it's going to be E, and pretty soon the light's going to come on, right? And to know that it's like there is no way that you are going to be able to put fuel back in this car. And now all of a sudden there's this magical experience that takes place in which that somebody says, hey, you don't need fuel to do this car. The people will actually push the car all on their own. But you have to convince them. You have to convince them of something that's going on. And then you have to play on that. This is like the ultimate of gaslighting experiences. Like gaslighting when it comes to like, a relationship or somebody, trying to convince somebody else that they're crazy and that everything that they're believing is inaccurate, even though it's true or whatever. This is like leading people to believe allowing people to continue to believe something when they know it's not accurate, right? This is the Fed allowing people, like very much like this gentleman who wrote the article that I left down in the description for you guys. They're allowing people like that to continue to believe and spread the information, right? Because doing that is part of the monetary policy. That is how they conduct themselves. If people are confused to the point that they look at what things are being said, like this gentleman is writing, and they think, okay, 2% target, trying to get that down there, and all this time, the Fed can now communicate in a way that says, hey, we are trying to attempt to do something that they're not even trying to do, right? And so, again, we take it back to the difference between a 2% average inflation rate and a 2% target, right? And being moderately above that. The 2% average never once, ever has to have a 2% achievement. I'm going to say that again. A 2% average inflation rate over time never once ever has to have a 2% achievement. They never have to achieve 2%. In order to achieve a 2% average inflation rate over time. Let me break it down like this. This is a good analogy to use. Let's imagine that I am going to shoot a rifle at a target, okay? Somebody says, what are you aiming at? The bullseye? And I say, nah, I'm aiming at the second line up there. See that second line? It says 2% on it. That's what I'm aiming for. And somebody says, okay, take a shot. And you go, boom, and it hits 3%. It hits the line above it. And you're like, dang, man, try it again. And you go, boom, right? And it hits 1%. And it was like, try it again. Boom, 3%. Boom, 1%. Boom, 3%. 1%, 3%, 1%. What's the average? All right? Never once do I have to hit 2% to achieve an average of 2%. All I have to do is either be above it or below it for a significant amount of time to make up for the fact that I failed to achieve the one way or the other. That's it, right? The makeup strategy. So it's very important to understand this over the long run, that they're going for a 2% average inflation rate. Locked in 2%, and people are convinced that they're going for 2%. That is locking in long-term inflation expectation. But the current inflation, they have no interest in achieving a 2% target. I don't know why people think that, right? I mean, I've got so many statements here coming from the Federal Reserve itself talking about how they are going for moderately above 2%. I mean, not only is it in the makeup strategy, it's in the long goals, the report on long goals. What was it? What is that damn thing called? Statement on long run goals and monetary policy strategies, and the full report to Congress. Every one of these says that the Federal Reserve is going for 2% average inflation rate over time and making up for the fact that they failed to achieve it by having moderately above or inflation moderately above 2%. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, they need to do this, and the whole point of doing it is so they can raise the neutral interest rate, right? And again, back to like Ben Bernanke's speech, once the Fed hit the lower bound of zero, there was no more room for adjustment of monetary policy. But even worse is something called the neutral interest rate. That is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. That, over the last 20, 30 years, 50 years, or whatever it was, 25 years, had fallen right along with the Fed funds rate and was very close to zero itself. So even if the Fed was to drop to zero, it can't get far enough below neutral to stimulate the economy. And this is the problem that John Williams was talking about back in November of 2018 with monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. Like he said it in that speech, that this was the problem that they were facing and that they were going to have to do something about it. And part of that doing something about it was something that he referred to as average inflation rate, right? Average inflation targeting, whereby the central bank purposefully aims to achieve above target inflation rate in good times when the lower bound is not constrained. Properly designed and implemented, such an overshoot can offset the inflation undershoot during bad times, so the long run average inflation rate and inflation expectations are in line with the target. This was stated in 2018, long before we had any inflation. I mean, they had just printed up a quadrupling of the money supply and failed to produce an inflationary scenario, and here he is at the end of all that saying, like, we didn't get any inflation, so maybe we should do average inflation targeting instead and shoot for above average inflation target. And I'm thinking, how in the world are you going to do that, man? You just printed up an insane amount of money and failed to achieve an inflationary scenario that you were looking for, and now all of a sudden you're just going to come up with some grand scheme to come up with a bunch of inflation to make up for the fact that you failed to achieve it over this last 10 years. And then COVID hit, bang, and all of a sudden we had all this grand inflation, and I'm like, no way. This was like a gift to the Federal Reserve. They were totally needing this. Now, with an elevated inflation expectation and elevated inflation out there, the neutral interest rate is beginning to rise. The Federal Reserve can really just sit still, which they are doing, and the neutral interest rate might just achieve them by standing still, so long as you have elevated inflation expectations and tariffs, right? See how this is all going down? Like, nobody sees it this way. I don't know why I'm the only one. I mean, it's just like, to me, it's so obvious when you go through all these speeches. It makes sense. But I guess it's really boring stuff, and most people don't have the time to do it. And, or even worse yet, they just so stuck in their old ways that they will never be able to grasp the fact that the Federal Reserve is conducting themselves completely differently than they ever have. Moving on. Let me just cruise down here to the bottom. All right. What's the average over what period of time? Without that part of information, we don't know what they mean, and they do exactly the Fed speaks because they are there to confuse you. Wrong, deplorable. No, we have gone over this, man. Again, like, you can't break the credible threat theory, bro. I've already got this covered. Okay, so they do not have a mathematical formula for figuring it out. That was Jerome Powell's statement, August 20th, right? Oops, let me get down to the right spot here. All right. In seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, we are not tying ourselves to a particular mathematical formula that defines the average. Thus, our approach could be viewed as a flexible form of average inflation targeting. Our discussion about appropriate monetary policy will continue to reflect a broad array of considerations and will not be dictated by any formula. So you're right. They have no formula for figuring it out, but they are looking at something, right? What is that something that they are looking at? And again, we have to take it to that of the Richmond Fed. All right? And this is what the Richmond Fed has to say. When considering average inflation over long periods of time, some dates stand out. In January of 2012, the Federal Open Market Committee adopted an explicit 2% inflation target. The goal was to keep long-term inflation expectations firmly anchored around this level to support the FOMC's price stability mandate. And this is, what everybody is believing. Okay, a significant date is September of 2020. When the FOMC revised its statement, that was what I was talking about, the long-run goals and monetary policy strategies, right? When they revised that statement, Jerome Powell reiterated that information, just what I was talking about having no mathematical formula. Okay. In this update, the FOMC adopted a flexible average inflation targeting, seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and stated that, quote, following periods when inflation has been running persistently. All right, we're back. Okay. Sometimes the connection here. Okay. Seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and stated, quote, following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Since this revised statement was released, headline PCE inflation, and this is like a little old. This is like, I don't know, maybe 2 years old, year and a half old. I'm not exactly sure how old it is. But it's not. That's not the point. The point is that the information that is being delivered here in just a second is what we need to hear. All right. Okay, has been running 5% per year, and core inflation has been running at 4% on average, or 4.4% per year on average. Okay, here it is. In the update, the FOMC did not define the window of time over which it would be looking back to assess progress towards its goal. Right? Again, we were talking about the time, the mathematical formula. They don't have one, right? By looking back far enough, it is possible to identify starting dates where average inflation through the present day has come in exactly at target. For example, now remember, this is kind of old. This is going back like almost 2 years, like a year and a half ago. For example, this is how they're considering inflation, guys, right? Because they don't have a mathematical formula for figuring it out, but they are going for a 2%. How do I put it? They are looking at a 2% average inflation rate over time, but how they come up with this is by looking backwards, right? Okay. When considering inflation from October of 2008 to August of 2023, headline PCE inflation averaged about 2% per year on average, right on target. So this is how they're looking at it. They're looking how far back do they have to average because obviously if you go back a year, there's going to be far more inflation. You'll never see a 2% target. So how far back do they have to look, incorporating all the inflation we've had and all the hits to inflation failed to achieve after the great financial crisis? How far back do they have to look in order to see the 2%? Right? That's how they're looking at this thing. I know that's confusing, right? Type in Richmond, go and Google it yourself. Richmond Fed average inflation rate. I don't know, it's probably somewhere around August of 2023, I guess. Somewhere in that nature is when this report came out. But then you see it. Like, once you see that, then you realize it was just like, okay, so the Federal Reserve in this whole 2% target that has got everybody convinced just simply doesn't exist. Right? When they are looking at it, it's over time. It's a historical moment. Right? They're looking back going, oh, how far back? What was the date that the 2% was achieved from all the inflation that we've experienced? It was October what? Oh, 2009, 2008? Oh, I see. All right. That's how they're looking at 2% target. That's the only 2% target they see. Is a historical one looking backwards. There is no, and then the future expectation, all right, anchoring a 2% inflation expectation. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I know, Deplorable, right? Because so many people have asked me questions about this, and I've had to do so much research to try and answer a lot of those questions that, I've got this thing pretty well dialed in. I'm like I said, I don't mean to sound arrogant or cocky or anything else about it, but I'll debate just about anybody out there when it comes to monetary policy. I think that 99% of the people got it wrong anyway, so it's just like it would be easy to debate just about anybody, right? Unless they have internalized all these speeches like I have. I have them in front of me, like on PDF files, so I can just recall them and bring them up, but I don't really need them. I know this stuff, Hey, Simon, have you ever looked at your family tree to see if you can get a second passport? No? I don't know why. I guess I could, but I'm not sure what I would do with it. Like, once, somebody was like, here, you got a second passport. That way you can get out of the country. It's like, okay, well, what would I do once I'm out of the country? It's like, I'd be out of the country. It was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. You nailed it this incredibly thoroughly. Yeah. Thank you, Brody. I mean, but again, it was developed over years, and since I was able to, like, literally, it was like, I think it was the channel itself asking the questions, and then that made me go and research it. So next time I saw that question come up, I would have an answer for it. And the more I did that, the more I dove into this stuff, the more I realized that, man, they are using two communications. Like, I could see it. I could see it clearly that they're using two communications when it comes to how it is that the people are feeling about the Federal Reserve and what it is that the Federal Reserve is actually doing, right? Because how they feel about the Federal Reserve makes a huge difference on their the way that they communicate to them. Because the action can be the same, that part can be the exact same, but the delivery of the information can change the outcome, giving it different meaning. And this is actually anything in life. This is like this is CIA kind of, like, mind game, playing games, stuff like that. But once you see it, it's not as easy to be pulled over on you. But if you don't know, like, if you were just not aware of, like, some of the things, like the information, these speeches that I have talked about, if you're not aware of all that information, none of it would make, like, you would be forced to be guided into this other way of believing, because you would have no other choice. There's, like, you have to be delivered the information in order for you to think that way, right? But if you are never delivered the information, or you don't seek it out yourself, then you'll have no other choice but to follow along with whatever it is that's being stated out there. Because, even if you don't want to believe it, if you've heard it, it will be internalized. Your subconscious will then believe it, right? See, this is why you shouldn't hang out with people who are drowning. People who are spiraling down. Like, a lot of people want to help. They want to be in there and say, "Hey man, I want to be encouraging," and all that. But if they are falling down and they are not actively trying to change the way that they are doing things to be, in the process of chasing excellence, even if you're like, "No, I'm not going to let this affect me," right? I'm just going to be here to be supportive of it. If you are in that environment, what you are going to do is you are going to take on that energy, right? Even if you don't want to, you're like, "No, I'm going to be like, I'm just going to be a friend. I'm going to hang out. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to be cool, and I'm going to walk away, and then I'm going to go do my own thing." Once you walk away, you will have taken a residual with you. Right? And this is important to understand, because by taking that with you, you will then carry it into the decision making. Your subconscious will then use that energy until it eventually dissipates. You stop thinking about it. You don't, whatever. But if you keep bringing it into your life, then you will find yourself, having to deal with that. And the more that you are aware of this happening, the more you start moving yourself into the direction of people that you want to be, you want to, like, essentially be like, right? You put the 5 people around you who are, the most business minded, or if that's what you're going towards, if it's maybe like, property ownership, you want to surround yourself with other landlords, whatever, you get into those energies, then you start absorbing some of those energies, and then next thing you know, you start progressing down that direction. Well, this is the exact same thing that this central bank is using, this mind game tactic, right, in order to conduct their monetary policy. And this is what's really crazy about it, is that every time you watch the news, every time you listen to this propagandized information, you are taking in this energy that will then have you in your subconscious leading you down a particular direction. They know how this works, right? Like, if I can explain it, and, like, I'm just some idiot down here in a car who doesn't know anything about psychology or nothing like that, can explain this thing, you think that those people who are professionals, who really understand this stuff, can learn how to do this in a mainstream way, right? And so once they have figured this part out, now they can deliver this information to you. And if you don't hear the other stuff, you won't have any other way of thinking. And then they deliver it through The View. They deliver it through, sitcoms. They deliver it through, online personalities, whatever, memes. They just start getting it out there in every single direction, whatever it is that they want you to believe and hear. And the next thing you know, it becomes common knowledge, and then that's the way it is. Right? And then somebody like me who's just like, well, what about all this other stuff? And they're like, dude, you must be nuts. Right? Because nobody else is talking that way. And it's just like, because they did it. They pulled it off. Right? They said that they were going to do it this way. They have communications inside of their speeches. There's two really great speeches that by Philip Jefferson, who talks directly about how the communication is conducting the monetary policy. That yesterday's he gave a speech on Friday. We broke it down in a members only live stream last night. Excellent. It's one of the better speeches that I've read in a long time. Talks all about how it is that the Federal Reserve conducts monetary policy and never once mentions interest rate adjustments. Seriously. He has this entire speech. It's like, I don't know, 9-10 pages long, talking all about how it is that the Federal Reserve conducts monetary policy and not one statement on interest rate adjustments. It's really good. In fact, let me read something from that. Let me bring this up because this is really good stuff. You guys should really go and take a look at that speech. If you're not following the channel, if you're not part of the Uneducated Economist group, you're really missing out. Become a member. It's $1 a month. You'll have access to all this information. All right. Here we go. Using textual analysis, high-frequency asset price data, and high-frequency central bank communication data, this research shows that investors' reaction to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. You hear that? Reactions to specific sentences communicated by the central bank are quickly incorporated into asset prices. They know what words to use, what specific sentences to use to alter the asset prices out there. Tell me they ain't playing mind games. I mean, they're straight up admitting it right here. Okay? This was a speech that was delivered just Friday by Philip Jefferson, voting member of the FOMC. Okay? Title of the speech, Reading Between the Lines, Textual Analysis of Central Bank Communications. Like, if that right there doesn't just, like, shock the hell out of you, like, I mean, I guess a lot of people are like, oh, bro, they've been doing that for years. They're always like, okay. This is them admitting how it is that they are using their words to guide monetary policy. They do not care about the interest rate adjustments as much as they care about the words that they are using. All right? And that is very different from what a lot of economists out there believe, very much like the gentleman that I left the link down in the description to. All right? Don't kill me, I'm just a vibe. I love it, man. I love these names. Thank you for the $2. Trump and Elon is stealing our democracy. They can't steal the democracy. You can only relinquish it. You know that, right? They can't give or take anything from you. You are the one who is allowing them to do that. If you are not retaining your constitutional rights, do you have one of these? Go get one. You know what that is? It's the Constitution of the United States of America. Everybody should have one of these things. All right? You know, it's not that bad. Look, it's not even that long. It's just a few pages, man. It's not, I mean, you could read it in just out of a few minutes, really. Right? How many people know who they're voting for and what they believe about this stuff? All right? See, this is where I really think it's just like Trump, Elon, they're mere symptoms of the real problems that are out there. They're not the problem. They're just evidence of it. Right? That's all that is. Biden, Trump, every single one of these people who continue to operate and allowing the central bank to continue to do what it is that they are doing are acting unconstitutional. They are not our friends. They are not a constant. Like, I don't care about those people and their politics and what it is they're doing. They are not acting constitutionally. They are not on my side. Right? People are like, you got to pick the lesser of two evils. Which one of those guys? Those guys? Those unconstitutional dudes? Hell no. Not interested. Don't think so. Right? I mean, if we were to take our country back, it would start right here by understanding this thing. But most people, Don't even know. They will, like, you hand them this, they will never open it up. Right? All-nighter, both parties bought, paid for by corporations, hobbyists. Yeah. We don't have a democracy. Yeah. Some follow the Constitution. The police officers in my town follow the Constitution. I follow the Constitution. Just don't let the mayor know. Yeah, well, the thing is that the only reason why they follow the Constitution is because the individual who they are communicating with is being constitutional. They know their rights, their freedoms, and what it is that they need to do to conduct themselves in order for those police officers to be within their to be in a position in which that they can continue to protect the Constitution, which is you being the one who is enforcing it at the time that they're being infringed. To tell the police officer, I'm sorry, no, I'm not going to answer any other questions, and I'm not going to continue on with this, right? Unless you can clearly articulate a law that I have broken, or a law that I have, a breaking of a law that I have committing, or about to commit, right? Unless you can articulate that, then there's no reason for a discussion. There's no reason to even communicate. There's no reason to give up evidence. Right? And understanding that is absolutely critical for being in a free state, right? But most people don't know it. And since most people just give it up, we don't really live it. We have to do it as a group, as a community. We all have to rise together in this idea and hold it there. But if most of us are down and like not paying attention to it and not caring about the Constitution, then they walk all over it. And this is exactly what we face. All right, all money comes from these central banks. All money is debt that must be repaid. Money does not build up unless debt does. We are playing a zero-sum game. Money does not build up in a society. Does not build up in society. All right. Do a live stream reading the U.S. Constitution line by line one day. Oh, that would be boring as hell. But yeah, okay. That would be fun. Actually, really, there's some good parts to the Constitution. Like some of them, like most of it is just boring. It's really telling government how they're supposed to conduct themselves. But there is a couple of parts in there that are really fun to read, like Article 1, Section 10, which is basically, let me see if I can find it here. No state shall enter any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque or reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt, and pass any attender ex post facto or law impairing the obligation of contracts or grant any title of nobility. Now, it's pretty fun to listen to people who really know the Constitution break that part down, but I think that particular spot where it says no state shall coin anything but gold and silver as a legal tender in payment of debt, right there, that one little statement inside of it is one of the reasons why I just don't feel that anybody within our government is acting constitutionally. They all want that central bank to, in order to continue to go in debt so that they can meet their, obligations to their constituents or whatever it is that they feel is appropriate out there. But ultimately, they're all acting unconstitutional. Right? They're not acting within the confines of it, and so therefore I just don't have any respect for it. Sorry. You can't make me. You can't make me have respect for something that is totally disrespectful. Central banks are supposed to be negative zero. If we expect it to be above it, debt and central bank governments are never the same as a business. It was what we call valuable money, unfortunately. Simon, how do you relate this to an art and culture in general? I'm an artist and I'm in this for leveling everything up to seeing the state of everything. It's really hard to just push through it all. Well, a different deja vu. Right? You're not our typical deja vu. I think to understand it that it's that it's cyclical happening, right? So this is like not something that is going to be continuous. It's always something that is going to be ever evolving and changing into something different. And this is where I think a lot of times that as we grow up, we think, man, it used to be. How come it's not like when it used to be like this? We could go back to, right? You hear all these kind of statements, and they don't. Those things are just kind of delusional thinkings because we don't go back. It's a forward going thing, right? And a lot of times when we think, okay, so we're progressing to something better, well, that's depending on how you position yourself. Are you positioning yourself to adapt to the change and to accept the fact that there is going to be differences within the economy? That means that you can't conduct yourself like you used to in order to acquire the things that you believe that you deserve. So mainly thinking like, hey, there was a time when a single income could provide enough for an entire household. That was true. You could have a wife and kids and vacations, retirement and college funds and all the other stuff by a single income. That's incredible to think. All right. Like I think about a single income right now, couldn't even barely, like, you can't hardly even own a car, all right? Let alone be able to provide all that for an entire family. And so to understand this is a progression into something different. And now when I think about it, I just look back to the Cantillon essay, read the Cantillon essay, read chapters 6, 7, and 8 in part 2 of the essay. So part 2, 6, 7, and 8, the increase and decrease of money to the state. It will describe almost perfectly how it is that the nation rises as a manufacturing powerhouse, loses their manufacturing to foreign production, and then eventually falls into poverty and misery. Now, the reason they fall into poverty and misery is because the new money turns off. Now, how that new money turns off is different for all these different nations as we go through history. So, like if you take the Romans, for example, they were off there conquering, right? So as they were conquering all these nations, they were able to take the new money coming from all these new nations in this war effort that they were doing, deliver it back to their homeland. The homeland would buy foreign production, but they didn't have a whole lot of domestic production taking place because they were buying so much foreign production that once the new money turned off, it all collapsed, right? And now this has happened many times through history in many different nations. China has faced this exact same thing many times throughout their history. They know about it. They've had fiat. They're the inventors of fiat currency. They know exactly how this works and know that it's cyclical, right? But it's not well understood and communicated out there as far as economics go. It's because most people are usually into just a short section of this cycle. And that's the only thing that they see, is that little section that they're in. And so if that's the only thing that you're really, that because that's really the only thing you should care about, because that's what you have to deal with, is the little section in time that you're a part of. But most people are looking at their little section of time at a historical, like they're back in history saying, well, this is how it looked. Now I got to deal with that same thing, and it's not the same thing anymore. It's a whole new world, right? So as they learn economics in their college courses and stuff like that, they're learning this old way of how it was done, but very few are learning how it is that the Federal Reserve is changing the way that they are doing things so that they can conduct themselves. Because if they were learning that, then the Federal Reserve wouldn't be able to use this policy, because it's all about job owning, forward guidance, credible threats, gaslighting, whatever you want to call it. But if everybody was quite well aware of it, it would collapse. It wouldn't work, right? Because you have to be literally looking over here, believing something, and then them allowing you to continue to believe that in order for this to work, right? And then again, how they deliver the message about about whatever action they take, regardless of what the action is, how they deliver that message will then result whether or not it's an increase or decrease, depending on what it is that they want. And again, we learned that from the monetary policy strategies, or from the makeup strategy. See, I got this stuff covered, guys. Nobody's got it better than me. And I don't mean to be arrogant, but I'm just being honest with it, man. Nobody else has got this dialed in like I do. All right, Cal, please misspell words the algo frowns on for sake of the channel. Yeah, please do. Because you got to think about it. Even like, I'm less concerned about the comment section, but if there's a lot of hate, if there's a lot of cuss words, if there's a lot of stuff that's going on within the comment section, the algorithm doesn't like that either, right? They love the engagements. The algo loves engagements, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, sharing the video big time, right? The more you share it, the more the video wants to get shared, right? So if you're sharing the video, the algo starts sharing the video. Comments are a big one. Interaction, like communication within their comments, huge for the algo. They love that because they want a video that people are engaged with to be, spread around for more people to engage with. It's all about advertising, right? The more people that would be able to stick around and hang out for the video and be part of the advertising process of it, that's what they're looking for. All right. Let me back it up here a little bit. Katie, UE, would you do a tutorial on how to buy and potentially sell silver? Yeah, Katie, that's actually a pretty good question. Now, me personally, all channels, right? As many channels, many different avenues as you can take. So if you don't have a local shop, that's where I would go first, right? But if you don't have the local shop or the local pawn shop or the local jeweler maybe who might be dealing in some of these things, then you're probably going to have to go online. Going online is a really safe way of going about it. Go to reputable dealers, right? There are a lot of them. In fact, the comment section is going to start filling up with all kinds of reputable online dealers right now. I personally find reputable dealers that are close to me. So there's one here, and I'm just going to name it just because, whatever, I'm not getting paid by them or anything else. They have really cool stuff. They're called Monarch Precious Metals. They're in my state, right? They have some really cool, unique pours. So I do a lot of purchases from them. They have these kind of Day of the Dead sugar skulls that I was purchasing for gifts for people because they were really unique, these little 2-ounce pieces. And I thought that was a lot of fun, so I kind of made them my choice to buy silver from. But if you go and you start looking at some of these online dealers, like, again, start with your locals, right? Go down to the local place. If you go to the online dealers, shop multiple places. Even like I hear like there's people who will buy, like, say, gold from Costco using a particular credit card that gets a certain percentage back on it, right? So they're even getting gold like under spot price, I heard, by doing this. Now, I don't know if that's true, but anyway, there's certain ways of going about it like that. But if you make that connection with your local dealer, that's the best one, because then it gives you an outlet to sell it too. That is like peer to peer. You're right there with the person instead of putting it in the mail and then having to trust the third party and then it come back to you later or something like that. By having that local dealer to go to unload your silver or gold with, that is probably one of the better relationships you're going to have when it comes to the selling part of things, right? So if you do have that local dealer, make that connection with them. Go down there once a week, make a purchase, once a month or something like that, learn their names, see, if they have any deals that come through that, you might be able to, take part of. Once you build that rapport up with them, then it makes everything a lot easier as far as being able to to make that transaction happen, whether it's the buy or the sell. So that would be me personally. I don't hate weirdo accusations. All right. I always use local coin shops unless there's something specific I wanted. Yeah. I need a $5,000 loan. Anyone? Yeah, good luck. All right. Prices are never going down. Time to adjust. Pawn Stars taught me to be skeptical of silver sellers too. Yeah, see, that's why I would go with reputable, like, online dealers. And like I said, the you'll probably find a bunch of them out there. But your local coin dealer, I mean, especially if they've been in the game for a long time, that's probably a fairly, safe place to go to. And if you're buying silver and you're buying like a piece or two at a time, like a silver bullet, one ounce at a time, while you're getting started, like after that, then you'll get more confident in what you're doing. You'll make bigger purchases. But I mean, I hate to put it this way, but if you buy something that was fraudulent or counterfeit or whatever, it's not like you're out the end of the world, right? I mean, a silver ounce is, 30, $40 or something. So, not a big loss, a little heartbreaking, to think that you got scammed, but, it's like, live and learn, and then you'll have like, that lesson in life. harder lesson to learn on a gold ounce, right? So buying silver pieces 1 ounce at a time till you learn what it is that you're doing and build up those relationships, that network, and then it makes it real easy after that. All right. Yeah, I don't know if silver could be diluted and solid and sold. All right. I can get you prob money, but you can't spend it. I can get you prop money, but you can't spend it. Oh, what's happening, Mr. Balloon Pimp? It's great to see you up in here, brother. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, UE and everyone else. Yeah. There's literally so many homeless in the USA. Oh, yeah. Huh. It was funny. That prop money actually made it to, what was it, like Safeway or something? Like one of the local grocery stores, and the kids down there accepted it. It's so funny. All right, as the deficit in bank debt, lowering the deficit lowers the amount of what we call money entering the system. Unless Donald Trump inputs the same amount of money, the price could also be at the top now. All right, I literally buy everything on black market. I wouldn't spend any more money than I need to until this ridiculous administration gets in line with reality. All right, Katie, there is lead in it, lead in it. Oh, hi, Simon. Thanks. Yeah, you bet, brother. Like I said, it's great to see you up in here. What is it like to live in Astoria, Oregon? Scott, actually, that's a good question, man, because I really love living in Astoria, Oregon. In fact, I can't imagine living anywhere else. I mean, this place is clean, it's friendly, it's home. It rains a lot, but after you kind of get used to that, it's not a big deal to deal with the rain. And so when I go and I check out other locations, it's like it's fun. Like there's other places like, in the world that I love to go visit and, even imagine myself, hey man, I can imagine living in this area and, enjoying the different city or whatever it happens to be. But then when I get home, I think to myself, man, it's this is it, man. This is like a place that I really want to be. I can't imagine living anywhere else. And and I think it's probably, like some of the politics is probably one of the reasons why I just got out of politics altogether and just stopped paying attention, because that's a little hard for a lot of people to deal with, especially if you're the conservative mindset. Because then you have to deal with a lot of liberal politics that are here, and that's very, very prevalent. But to me personally, I just don't let it bother me, and I don't even like, actually discuss it with most people. And when they know that I could just pretty much run circles around them in a conversation when it comes to economics, they don't even want to discuss politics with me. Like for the most part, people start, they start kind of opening up about that kind of thing, and I just give them a look like, I'm about ready to say some stuff that you're probably not going to even understand. They just kind of quickly back out. So that's not something that I have an issue with around here. People will be people. I've always been a libertarian. So the way that people conduct themselves and handle themselves, that's their business. Like that's not for me to make a judgment on to say, hey man, you need to change the way you're living your life. That is not me to do. Right? I am not going to be that person. And so like when I see people acting a fool or whatever, it's just like, well, as long as they're doing it over there and not right here, then I'm going to be cool with it because I'm not going to pay attention to any of that stuff or not. I'm going to let it bother me. And, that's just kind of the way I feel about that. But like, you think about it, the environment around here, just the land itself, like living in the Pacific Northwest, we have an abundance of so much around here. Like I live in one of the most abundant seafood areas that you could ever possibly live. Okay. The Columbia River here, the fishing industry brings in so much that it's just like it's everywhere around here. I've eaten so much Dungeness crab in my life that it's like it's almost to the point that it would be like, oh, again, God, this stuff is getting gross, right? Like that's literally the life that I've lived around here because it's just an abundance of it. Salmon, I mean, I've eaten 10,000 pounds of salmon in my life. I mean, I was like, I can't even tell you how much fresh salmon that has come across my table throughout my life living around here, but that's just the way it is, right? I mean, we don't think much about it. I go out into the woods and I can pick 50 pounds of chanterelles if I wanted to, people look across the globe and they're thinking chanterelles at 30, 40, $50 a pound or something like that, and I can eat as many as I want, right? That's what's funny about living up here is that we kind of feel like we're in this abundant mindset when it comes to that sort of thing. Yeah. It's not uncommon. Like I remember when I was like 20 years old, I remember sitting down at dinner. We were eating salmon that we had just caught, this big giant pan of chanterelles, and the only money that I had for beer was enough that I could go and get something called, and some of you who remember this beer, it was called a sheaf stout, right? And it was like at the time when I was 20 years old, it was like an expensive beer. It was like $3.50 for this bottle of beer. And nowadays, people are like, that's not expensive. But at the time when I was 20, that was an expensive beer. And I remember like we were sitting around eating this, and I was thinking to myself, how funny it is that uh, cool, we're back. And I just remember like, uh, cool, we're back. And I just remember like, eating this meal thinking how like normal it is to do something like this, have this sort of meal, and how gourmet it would be for somebody to have these ingredients to make into a restaurant that would, or to have at a restaurant that would probably sell for, better than $50 or more, or $100 or whatever, depending on, the fanciness of the restaurant. And I'm thinking this is common. This is like, what we do up here all the time. This is not, that would not have been special, you know? And so it's sort of that kind of thing. And I know every area has this uniqueness to it, has their uniqueness to it and stuff like that. But to me, like, man, I don't want to give that up. Like, I love all that. Hey, UE, if the Cantillon effect keeps pushing wealth to the top, is it changing society over time? Absolutely. Making people rely more on financial loopholes than real hard work and innovation. Well, I mean, I rely. Okay. Yeah. I mean, because you got to think. Okay, how does the new money come in? When the new money came in to this nation through production and savings, that was a different way of life. There was a whole different way of conducting yourself. So an individual who was getting that new money in from working at a factory that produced something that sold it overseas, you got to think this is how that new money was coming in. The people who have first access to that money and what it is that they do with it, that is the way that the economy is going to be conducted. Right? So here you have factory workers producing stuff, getting that new money in from, selling it to the, selling their production overseas, getting that new money in and then raising their standard of living. Now you think, okay, how does the new money come in to the system today? It comes from debt issuance. It doesn't come from the production and savings, like, producing something and selling it out there to the world. It comes from debt issuance. So now what is it that people are doing in order to be closest to the new money? Well, you have to borrow the money, right? So what happens when the people who are borrowing the money, what do they do with themselves? How are they conducting themselves? So you got two directions you can go. You can dive into luxurious experiences, right? Or you can put it towards cash flowing assets. So when you borrow money, like if you have to go and work for it and you have to be a producer saver, that's going to create a whole different kind of economy that's happening out there as people are producing and saving and then trading for other producers and savers. But now what we have is people who have access to money or access to borrowed money, and then they tend to put themselves in a position in which that they have to continuously work hard in order to pay back that luxurious expense that they had used with that debt. Then other people borrow money, buy an asset that usually means that somebody else is going to end up working to pay for not only that asset, but the borrowed money it took to buy that asset. And this is how that separation really starts to grow. Right? It was going to grow anyway from the new money coming in and the people who have first access to that money. But when the first access to the money is coming from production and savings by the people themselves, it's going to be a far different economy than the production or than the borrowed money coming in, separating the rich from the poor by the purchases that they are making. Yeah. And so it's a whole different realm of being. Like, we can't fix it. Don't try to take the information and internalize it into a way that you can try and understand how you need to fix it. Right? You are going to drive yourself absolutely bonkers. Trying to think, okay, I understand how to fix the system, and then you got to go and try and find somebody who's going to agree with your belief that you have to vote for. And then they have to go and conduct things within the economy that then align with what it is that you believe can fix it. You see how difficult this is going to be? It's not going to work. I can tell you now it's not going to happen, right? Because nobody, like, you might be able to find a handful of people who agree with you, but almost nobody's going to agree with you, right? Because everybody has their own ideas of what it is that needs to happen out there. So it's better to understand what it is that's taking place, right? See, when back in the 70s, a lot of people want to blame Nixon for severing us off the gold standard. I don't think a lot of people realize that if he hadn't done that, we would be suffering in pain and misery and poverty right now due to the fact that we would have relinquished all the gold back out there to the rest of the world. All right? But it was the fact that it was time for equilibrium. It was time for that gold to be relinquished back out there to the rest of the world because we had hoarded onto it. And when it was time to do that, Nixon said, "Nah, I think we're going to keep it. We're going to keep it instead, and you guys can just use this fiat currency, and that'll be just as good for doing transactions, right? I mean, that's all you really want is transactable currency, and that's what the gold does. But since we don't want to give up the gold and you're using dollars already, how about we just sever ourselves off the gold standard and you can have as many dollars as you want to do as many transactions as you want. And the more you do it, the harder it's going to be to return back to the gold standard or to use anything else. And so therefore, we can, as the United States, continue to issue out debt that people seem to continue to buy because there's really nothing else that they can use that will be in place of what should have been the gold. That's the problem that we face. There's no fixing that. I wish there was. You know, I mean, I really do. I mean, I honestly wish that there was a way of fixing it, but I realize that there's no fixing the system. There's no point in trying to do that. The only thing that you can really do is understand it for yourself so that you can position yourself for it. Right? Allow other people, like, you can give them your idea. You know, hey, man, what about this idea for, some other currencies or some other way of doing things? And I mean, they might be wonderful, great strategic ideas, but by taking the time to try and come up with this hypothetical concept that probably will never exist, you have missed out on the opportunity to recognize what is truly going on so that you can deal with the fact that it's happening right now. Yeah. I mean, I personally, in the decisions that I make, I feel are really appropriate for what it is that I'm doing. Other people out there look at me and they're like, dude, you could be doing so much more. And I'm thinking, more for what? Like, what is it that I need to be doing? It's just like, I understand that you probably want more in your life and you probably want to see me having more in my life, but I don't really know what it is that I would even want in my life to even try that hard to go and get when this is what I feel is the most appropriate thing I could be doing. All right? This, to me, I don't feel anything wrong or upsetting or difficult or anything like that going on. Like, I don't like a lot of things that I see out there within the economy, within the politics and stuff like that. I don't like it. What am I going to do? Nothing. There's nothing I can do. Absolutely not a thing that I could possibly do to change any of that stuff. And so therefore, the meaning that I'm giving it is that I have to understand what it is that's taking place so I can make appropriate decisions. That's the only meaning that I give it. Not one that this is good or bad or ugly. It's not that. That's not, even if I thought that, it wouldn't be important to anybody else. So, all right. I was in LA in 92. It was actually fun. I have a 836 FICO score. Yeah, that's about where mine is. And because God and my family pay it forward. Yeah, I mean, I have about the same on mine. And building up my credit score from absolutely trashed. I mean, when I had foreclosure on the house and all that other stuff, it was absolutely horrible. I rebuilt my credit in no time at all using credit cards, and really it was pretty easy if you're disciplined with it. I just take out a credit card. I got 4 different credit cards that I took out over the course of a year. I would make like maybe $100 purchases and pay off everything but $5, and I would do that like on a credit, one of the credit cards every couple of months or something like that. I would just use one of those and just make it active and then leave $5 balance on the thing the entire time. Like never once ever paying it off, and then paid them off, right? And watched my credit score just shot right through the roof. The more you use it, the higher your credits go. Like if you start paying off credit cards and you don't use them, then your credit score isn't as good. It's kind of funny. If you're using it and you don't even have to like pay, like even just a $5 balance left on your credit card makes a world of difference as your credit score goes. Just don't be late, and make sure you pay it. Politics are not moral. All right, that is an interesting perspective on socialism, all-nighter. Oh, what did all-nighter say? I disagree, Kirk. I see the family unit as a near-perfect socialism working because of its small nature. Yeah, that is an interesting perspective. All right, Larry Bird, UE, is it raining in Oregon? Oh, yeah, is it raining in Oregon? I mean, it rains 9 months out of the year here, guys. 9 months out of the year. Those months don't run consecutively. But yeah, it rains pretty much every single day in Oregon. It's always like this. Does anyone think social unrest will happen in 2025? To what level? Like, what kind of social unrest? Like Occupy Wall Street social unrest? Remember when they were trying to clean that up in all the cities at the same time? You know what was funny about that? Is that I think that was a ploy to try and get cities geared up for those type of events. I really do, because the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was this spontaneous protest that popped up, was well talked about on the internet long ahead of time. Like, I remember talking to Sarah about it. It was just like, wow, there's this weird chatter all over the internet about this big protest that's going to take place on Wall Street. And then all of a sudden, when it was happening, all the news coverage says this spontaneous protest all of a sudden manifested itself there. And I'm like, what in the hell? No way. This was organized, right? Well, it turns out, it was old George Soros and his, what was it? They had like, I forget how they funneled it through, but they kind of channeled it back to that dude, which is not surprising. But all the cities that kind of followed along with that Occupy movement, like I even remember it was taking place here in Portland, and there was a bunch of people that I know who were going to go up and protest, and I asked them, I said, what are you going to go up there and protest for? And like one of them, it was this young girl, she was actually buying some whiskey to go take it up there, and she says, I don't know, I'm just broke and I just want to go and have like hang out or something like that. So they were going to go protest and didn't even know why, and I thought that was pretty funny within it. But anyway, so all these cities were all lit up with this protest, and then literally practically on the same day, they started like, because before they were like corralling them and dealing with them and trying to handle the situation. And then one day it was like clear out the parks. Boom. Right. And it was just like within a matter of like just a couple of weeks, it was like cleared out all that Occupy stuff. They allowed that protest to happen. Like it was meant to take place. Now, whether it was to gather information about who the leaders are or whatever it was that was happening at the time, it was allowed to take place. And as I'm sitting there watching it all go down, and I'm like, whoa, man, all these sheep are just gonna go run right into the damn trap, huh? And I'm like, same thing with like, I hate to say it, but it's just like, all these protests at the capitals and stuff like that. Again, right? I was just like, wow, pawns, right? Pawns in this major chess game that has taken place. They don't even realize it. They think they're on the forefront of something big, being on the front end, right? Smashing through the lines, not realizing that they are merely a pawn in the bigger game. Right? It's just like, what do you do about it? It's probably the same thing that's happened throughout history, and it'll continue to happen. Where's that super chat? Hey, Larry Bird, love you, bro. Thank you, man. Same back. Same back. Love you too. Cruise down the bottom, deja vu. I still have 1,009. What is it? 1,000 share of Lehman Bros certificates printed on green paper that are useless. Never again. Huh. They had to make room for the illegals. We are seeing poor locations and all investors are dumping houses, but the well-off areas are still appreciating as a, what is FWIW? All right, we'll see what another 6 months brings. Yeah, well, I mean, the way I see it is just like, between the separation between the rich and the poor is obvious when it comes to property ownership. Right. And I mean, my area is just like, it's just screaming example of it. And the fact that, like, I didn't even realize that what I was doing was trying to buy a house in one of the most expensive areas in the entire country for the size of the city that I'm in. And so when I hear people talk about how difficult it is to make it and to try and buy a house and all this other stuff, yeah, tell me about it. Right? I mean, here, I don't have a college degree. I don't have anything special. I don't have business. I don't have family inheritance. I don't have any of that stuff, yet I was able to buy a house in one of the most expensive areas in the entire nation. And so when people say, man, you don't know nothing about economics, you don't know anything or whatever, I'm thinking, no, right? What I had to face was something that was incredibly difficult. And if it wasn't for the understanding that I have of things, I would have never been able to do it. I hear people say, man, not everybody can have a YouTube channel. I agree. But, I work this YouTube channel like it was a second job, and I think anybody could go out there and get a second job. Right? Is it too much? Yeah. You bet it's too much. Damn right it's too much. Right? It's too much to have to do, and it's not fair. I agree. It's absolutely not fair. It shouldn't be this way, but this is the way it is. And it's quite unfortunate for a lot of people out there who are wishing and hoping and dreaming for a different way that it should be, but it's not going to be any different way. I mean, I think about people out there who rent an apartment and that's all they have. Right? And they show up every day at their job and they think, man, it sucks, man. All I have is this apartment. You're so lucky you have a house. And I'm thinking, hey, at the end of 30 days, your liability is done. You get to do whatever you want. You have as much freedom and possibilities and options that the world could ever possibly provide to you. You got everything in the world, in front of you. But they don't see it that way. Right? See, I have 30 years of liability. 27 years of liability now. Now, can I take this liability and turn it into a cash flowing asset at some point? Absolutely, I can, depending on the decisions that I make with it. Very much like the decision that this individual can make by having an apartment and nothing else in their life. They have the options to do whatever they want. And I have an option to turn this into a cash flowing asset. Right? Everybody has to make decisions for themselves. YouTube has everything for everyone. They even have prison politics channels. That's wild. 2008 crash made me more frugal. I learned no one's saving you but yourself. That mindset has set me up for success. If any downturn were to take place, 2008 was a great teacher. I agree. It took me a long time. Like, I got whooped hard from that, and it took me forever to recover from it. But I think had I not experienced it, then I know I wouldn't be here doing this today. So it was a lesson well learned. Like, sometimes you have to learn lessons in order to succeed. And if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, or you think you know what you're doing when you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get taught a lesson. Right? That's all there is to it. Just like anything in life, you have lessons in life are repeated until learned. And so, yeah. All right. Okay, it says the U.S. could replace income tax with tariffs by imposing high import duties, incentivizing domestic production, implementing a national sales tax, and cutting government spending to balance revenue. Well, Kane, that's a real, it's a real intelligent sounding articulated statement, right? I mean, and I don't want to say, hey man, you're wrong, right? But the problem that we face with this is that we get new money in from debt issuance that we sell to foreign people out there. The only reason why they're buying our debt issuance is because we're buying their production. If we are not producing a consumer here in the United States, the whole system begins to unravel. We could do all kinds of things that would make it look better for our economy and then better for our production and better for our own domestic, you know, being or whatever, but we are not in a position that we can do that, being the issuer of the world reserve currency and considering the standard of living that we have now elevated ourselves up to. We are in desperate need of foreign production that is built incredibly cheap by foreign labor that we are buying with debt issuance to continue this way of life. If we go in any other path, we are going to face pain and misery. Now, I'm prepared to do that. I'm down for it. Like, I am down. Like, dude, your idea sounds great. Let's do it. Okay? But I know that there's going to be people out there who are going to be crying their eyes out because that's going down, because it's going down that way. And I'm going to take advantage of that. Divorce, death, or destitution, whatever it is, I'm going to see that's out there as far as my opportunity. If something like that was to present itself to me, I would take advantage of it. The unfortunate part about that is most people will be suffering in such pain and misery from it that it wouldn't feel good to have been taking advantage of that. But I will, because nothing is fair. All right, your steering wheel is on the wrong side. I know I can't flip my camera. I tried doing it again before I started, so I don't know what it is that I'm doing that's not making the damn camera flip right. So, all right. Didn't Mush say the government will eventually give universal paychecks? He makes no sense. No, actually, that's true, Jose. I think that's part of that's part of producing a consumer here in the United States. Right? See, this is the main product that we build as a consumer. How do we build a consumer? How do we make sure that the people are going to continue to buy foreign production? And unless, like, because we used to be able to do it through debt issuance, right? You just lower the interest rates a little bit. The people will go out there, see those lower interest rates. They would get excited to go out there and buy houses, cars, and go on vacation. That was very easy for the central bank to do for the last, 30, 40 years, was to just lower interest rates and continue to lower and lower and lower. Well, they eventually hit the lower bound of zero, and boom, it didn't work anymore. And they're like, oh, crap, now what? The people are debt saturated. We can't lower interest rates anymore to get them to go out there and borrow money. What is it we're going to do? How do we get them to borrow money? You can't. Well, the government will borrow the money and force feed it right into you through debt, through UBI, right? And now you'll go out there and buy foreign production again. Since they can't lower interest rates to get you to borrow the money to go do it, they will borrow the money and force feed it into you. And then they'll have this continual, perpetual, force feeding of money. The separation will really, really get out of control at that point. Like, if you see a continuous flow of new money coming in through UBI issuance, you will see a dramatic rise in inequality. If you thought it was bad now, you're talking like off the charts. Right? And I don't care how much you tax, that ain't going to fix it. Right? Because the more that you tax the wealthy, the more punishment you are giving to people, or the more punishment that you are inflicting upon the people for success. Meaning that if you are already on the bottom line and you want to be successful, you're going to get punished for doing it because they're taxing the wealthy. It'll force you down. Right? And that's the reason why the inequality will grow. Those who are already sitting in the position to have that money flow right to them once it has been injected through UBI, they're just going to explode out of control in as far as, how far away from the poor they get. This is going to be unreal. And so, I don't look forward to that day, But I do believe that's going to happen because I don't think they have any other choice to keep the economy going. They literally have to produce a consumer. And outside of force feeding the money into you, I'm not sure how they can do it. I mean, we're not going back to being producers, right? We're not going to be getting new money in by producing and selling to the globe. I mean, we might be able to do some. We do a lot. I mean, we produce a lot of stuff and sell it to the globe. We're a huge agricultural manufacturing. We produce a lot of food and sell it out there to the world. But the amount that we consume, as far as like, if you just take the dollar amount of what we buy as opposed to what we sell, we buy far more than what we sell. You know? Should we do away with Federal Reserve, return to constitutional money, i.e., Treasury notes? Oliver, I don't think it would make any difference which way you go with it. Like whether you have a hard currency, a limited currency, a Federal Reserve, central bank currency, none of that, all of it is going to have its issues, one way or the other. Whether you have a problem with, business cycles that create, depressions every, 10 years or whatever it takes, or if you have debt cycles that continue to separate the rich from the poor and grow ever worse. I don't know which one of them you want, right? Pick your poison. Either one of them I'm down for. Like, I don't care. I mean, I care. I care a lot. I care a lot about all kinds of things, right? But I mean, it's not up to me to care what the environment is supposed to look like. Like, that's not what I'm supposed to care about. What I care about is what it does look like and what it is I'm supposed to do. So even putting out the idea, will we be better without a Federal Reserve? That is a what if, and that what if doesn't exist. And so therefore, internalizing information on a what if doesn't provide you with anything, right? I mean, it does if you want to think about what it is that you would do in that sort of situation, which I have done. But then once you have done that and you have positioned yourself for it, there's no point in dealing with it anymore, right? You can hope for it to happen. And that way that position really goes like big and then you get to take advantage of that. But to wish upon it, to say, hey, I want that to happen, is very deteriorating within your own constitution, like with your own thoughts. So again, like knowing that there was a possibility of a hard currency that is out there. Well, right now, I don't see that being a possibility. But yet that gold and silver does serve a purpose, right? Now, most people want to look at it and say, hey, it needs to serve a purpose as being a currency. We need to be able to do transactions with this. And although that's something that it could do, that doesn't even come close to what I look at it for. Like I look at gold and silver and I don't think, okay, this should be a hard money. This should be something that we use. This should be constitutional money. This should be what the government, like, I don't think anything like that. I look at it and say, this is an insurance policy against a third party claim. I don't have to worry about governments, banking. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff so long as I have this. And if I have this, I get to sleep at night thinking that if there's a stock market crash or a banking holiday or something of that nature, I got something that's outside of that third party claim. Okay, that's it. Like, I don't have to think about it anymore. Add a little bit more to it. Pay attention to, what's kind of happening with the price every once in a while. See if there's buying opportunities or possibly selling opportunities. But to fascinate, have this fascination of like constantly thinking of how the government could switch over to a gold standard or something of that nature. Once you've thought about it a couple of times, and internalize the information, that's it. Let it actually happening that you should probably be paying attention to so that you could be making the most better appropriate decisions for. All right. If the stream of income went up from bottom, at least everybody would have a chance to touch it and will end up at the top, but at least everybody will have a chance to taste it. Okay, trash can, man, I kind of agree with the statement of it, but unfortunately, even within itself, right? It's just like, well, at least we would have a chance, right? And that's true. Actually, if everybody was given the UBI and then didn't they didn't go and enjoy it, right? They were like, hey, we're going to give you UBI to go and do whatever you want. And everybody went like, I'm buying stocks, I'm buying gold, I'm buying crypto, I'm buying property. And that's all they bought with that stuff, right? Well, then you would find that a whole bunch of people who are at the bottom end, right, would all of a sudden start finding themselves in a capitalistic position. The only problem with doing that is that the moment that they start buying into that, the people who have already purchased, which are all the property owners and capitalistic people who are there today, would excel far higher because of all that purchasing that they're doing. Would they be in it too? Sure. They would elevate themselves a little bit higher than the people who didn't, but the more that people were doing that, the more it would elevate the rich. So what if they didn't do that? They just spent it on whatever they want. Well, then they would remain poor. Nobody would elevate themselves, and all that money would end up going to the top anyway through the purchasing of products and expanding the companies and the corporations. All right? So to understand, it's like a cycle of, it's like literally a cycle of growing inequality and then a breakdown. Right? That's how it happens. Reversing it doesn't work. There's no reversal to this. The reversal is a crash, and it's fast. All right. Thank you. Recordings before the nuke went off. Thank you so much for the $14.99. If new money comes into the system, whoever gets it first better spend it as quickly as possible, because the price of things, man will not sit around and wait. Yeah, actually, the people who have first access to the money, what they better do with it is buy cash flowing assets. Right? The people who have first access to the money, they buy cash flowing assets with it, and then they will be able to expand and move beyond that of what everybody else is doing. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It's not like, I think probably the biggest thing that people should probably come to the understanding is that it's not fair. Right? There's no fair way of going about it. It's not going to be fair. There's going to be people out there who have an extreme amount beyond a bunch of people out there who seem to have nothing in their life. And it doesn't seem fair. And they're absolutely right. It's not fair. The world's not fair. Government's not fair. The system's not fair. Life's not fair. There's nothing fair about it. And so it's better to understand that and say, okay, the reason why I am here down at this lower end is because I expect things to be fair. And if I don't expect it to be fair anymore, then now I can take a position that says, okay, these other people aren't going to do it, but I am. And I'm going to buy cash flowing assets with debt issuance, and I'm going to do it in an extreme manner, and I'm going to have 150 houses, and people are going to be like, oh man, you're lucky. How did you figure this out? You shouldn't have that much. Says who? All right. Haters gonna hate, ain'ters gonna ain't. That's so true. If we get UBI, golden eggs may go up, or eggs may go up in price. Yeah. All right. Of the last 80 years, this idea of perpetual growth is reaching its final. Life is not fair. If anybody told you otherwise, they are selling you something. I love The Princess Bride. I do too, Trash Can. It's probably one of the greatest statements that was in that movie. Life is pain. Anybody else who's telling you differently is selling you something. Right? So true. And it doesn't have to be like, it's not hard to chase excellence all the time. It's not hard. You know when you're doing right, you know when you're doing wrong. You know when you're sitting there in your house, not doing anything, not chasing any kind of business, not trying to make any kind of connection or network, doing absolutely nothing, playing video games all day, wondering what it is that you're supposed to be doing, right? That is the failure. That is failure right there. And that's probably the way that most people end up living. I see people out there who just dream and wish and hope and pray that they could have a wonderful business connection and properties and all kinds of stuff out there, and they spend their days hanging out at the bar. All right? And don't get me wrong, I liked hanging out at the bars. I spent most of my time hanging out at the bar from the time I was 20 to 40 years old. That's what I did. For 2 decades, I hung out at the bar, made so many friends, made so many connections. Anytime I was ever out of a job, I would go and sit on a bar stool and talk to people about construction, and pretty soon I found a... Man, the connection is terrible. But anyway, moving on here. Okay, what are your thoughts about modern monetary series, and are you disagreeing with Gary Stevenson about how to fix inequality? I disagree with just about anybody who seems to think that they can change the way that the economy is conducting itself or the way the economy operates. Right? I mean, they're like, oh, we can have this system of UBI, or we can have this cryptocurrencies, or we could have, right? All this what ifs. All that stuff is all hypothetical things that are not real.